So, as most of you know, our out-of-county inmates, both the U.S. Marshals and Cook County, have been declining since 2014. From inception, the Sheriff's Office has been, as many of you indicated, one of the top 3 sources of revenue for the county, including sales tax and property tax. We provided to the Public Safety Committee the projected revenue for fiscal year 16 of approximately $5.2 million. Unfortunately, the original projection of $6.5 million in bed rentals, we are more than likely not going to make. That is certainly not a secret. Even with the decrease in revenue, we have shown that in a down year, the bed rental program reduces the cost to taxpayers by $2.5 million. And just for clarification, since there seems to be some confusion, the Sheriff's Office makes up approximately 43% of the general fund budget. Not 75% has been reported in different places. Back in July of this year, some board members held secret meetings discussing the possibility of closing the downtown jail. I was not involved in those meetings, and as I told the Finance Committee then, when you're continuing to look for revenue, why would anyone consider closing a potential revenue generator? I say all this because on Wednesday at approximately 5:30, I received a telephone call from the director of the Chicago Office of Homeland Security, Ricardo Wong. I've been working with Director Wong for a long time, and he's very familiar with our interest in housing ICE detainees, and he asked if we had any space available at this time. Just for the record, I did say yes. We've done a couple things throughout our dealings with ICE to prepare just in case this day ever happened, including having the IGA, the Intergovernmental Agreement with the Marshals, modified to include the housing of ICE detainees, which, as he indicated on Wednesday, sped up our process. According to Director Wong, by speeding up this process, they are able now to check with and verify with headquarters if in fact they are going to be able to utilize housing their inmates in Kankakee. However, he did say nothing would happen for 30 to 60 days. Later that same evening, Director Wong indicated that he was sending officials from ICE to Kankakee for an inspection. True to his word, ICE was here on Thursday at 8:30 in the morning on October 6th. We were notified on Thursday that ICE was going to start us out slow and send Kankakee County 75 ICE detainees. However, there was much work to do. Between ensuring that we met basic ICE standards and preparing our staff for additional duties, Chief of Corrections Chad Kalawenzu, who's standing in the back behind Mr. Gessner, his Assistant Chief Rob Schultz, and Lieutenant Marlon Woods, along with others, have worked tirelessly from Thursday through the weekend to ensure a smooth transition to receive the 75 ICE detainees. We received those 75 ICE detainees on Saturday. Some of you may be asking the question, if we turned down 40 from Cook County back in June, how are we able to take 75? That is obviously the obvious question. Number one, there are different types of detainees. We are also utilizing assistance from our deputies with transporting outside of the building, so that's keeping our correctional staff inside the building to be able to supervise these detainees. Cook County inmates were hardcore problematic inmates that, quite frankly, we didn't have the staff to deal with, which is one of the reasons that we didn't take them. I don't want to put my staff in that situation to deal with some of the inmates that they would send us when they wanted to send us the 40. At this time, we're unsure whether this will be long-term or short-term. I can tell you that every ICE facility utilized by the Chicago office, McHenry County and Pulaski County, which those of you unfamiliar with Pulaski County, it's about the southernmost county in the state of Illinois, and Kenosha County and Dodge County in Wisconsin are full. Now, ICE focuses on 3 important factors that they expect us to do the same. Medical care, of which we are accredited by the National Commission on Correctional Health Care. Our food provider is outstanding. It is one of the fewest complaints we get is our food. although some would question that. But the food provider is working with us to ensure that we meet their standards. And that's what this is, just for the record. These are ICE standards. So this is what the correction staff has been dealing with for the last 4 or 5 days. The majority of that we already do, but there are certain standards that they require that we are implementing as we speak. And transportation, and obviously we have that. Unfortunately, we don't have vans, and Mr. Bosser did reach out last week and ask if we had a contract yet through Ford, and unfortunately, for those of you that don't know, most of our department was dealing with a triple homicide out east, so we didn't really have time to go look at contracts for vans. And by all means, most importantly, from your standpoint when dealing with anybody who's asking, ICE refers to those in custody as detainees, not inmates. So that's been difficult for us in the business to get used to. I'm sure it'll be difficult for everybody else to get used to. As far as anticipated revenue, the rate of $80 per day, which is what the marshals pay, and they are piggybacking off that marshals contract, will generate, if you do the simple math, 75 times 80 is $6,000 per day. Minus $412.50 that we have to pay for food. At this point, our staffing levels, the correction staff is working overtime, which they were doing prior to this anyway, because we did some fix-up work in some of our housing units out of Jerome Combs. And that overtime will continue at a cost of approximately $1,200 per day. So the net revenue range will be from about $4,000 to $4,500 a day with just the 75. That number could change with additional detainees, and I believe that that's a conservative number. I will update the Public Safety Committee on October 20th as we continue to move this forward. We are hiring additional staff from our most recent testing process, and we have another test scheduled for next Monday, October the 17th. There are things that you as a board need to be aware of regarding potential fallout. Number one, the possibility of protesters, which they might have to get in line based on what I saw walking in this morning. Negative media. There are many who think that these individuals who may or may not have committed criminal offenses shouldn't be locked up in a jail for strictly crossing the border. Those are questions that any facility that houses ICE get all the time. We're prepared to deal with these issues. I just want to make you aware of them that we'll be dealing with them. These detainees will be treated with dignity as we treat all of those who are in custody. If they act up, they will be dealt with accordingly. But again, ICE has the rules as to how we deal with them. So knowing that helps us significantly. I'd like to give credit to our correction staff who a lot of times go without recognition. I often refer to them as a football analogy as offensive linemen. They only get noticed when things go bad, when they get a holding penalty. The correction staff does a tremendous job. They have stepped up. They understand the situation that the county's in. They understand what's going on, and they are working their tails off to make this work. I would like to ask, at this point, and it's a little bit, maybe you can't answer, but I would just ask what the rush is to pass the fiscal year 17 budget. Is it strictly for layoffs? And if it is, I would certainly recommend that you re-examine it. Questions?
Questions for the sheriff? Mr. Burns first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff, in regards to the triple homicide and how that impacts on your staffing levels in the future in case of any potential incident similar to this, how is that impacting your office currently?
Well, this is basically a breakdown of everything going on with the homicide since it happened a week ago Sunday. There are approximately 38, and I believe it's a couple more now, individuals that we are talking to. It's ongoing. We are utilizing every possible body we can use, including those even outside our department. So it's moving forward. They're doing a great job. Our relationship with those individuals out in the east part of the county obviously comes into play and has worked to our advantage because we do have a good relationship with the Pembroke Township area. And as tough as it is to get cooperation, sometimes we're moving in the right direction. And I'll just leave it at that. I mean, obviously I can't say a whole lot, but that's where that's at right now. Thanks for the question.
Any questions related to the housing, inmate housing? Mr. Campbell?
Yeah, sure. I got a couple questions here. Approximately how many additional guards is this going to take? How long does it take to train them? Okay. Are these being, are the detainees
Good job.
being housed downtown separate from the other ones? And then on the protest factor, the road to the sheriff's department, it runs east and west, and it comes to an end on a north-south road.
Bless you.
Now, from that road, is that a private road where we can stop protesters?
No, it's a
back?
public roadway. It's a public
It is.
roadway.
Okay.
Now, unfortunately, I stayed up and watched the Cubs last night, so you're probably going to have to repeat a couple of those questions. So I guess to answer your question, as far as staffing, there's a couple positives from a staffing standpoint. Number one, part of our collective bargaining agreement does allow a 1-year probation period. So if this ends up being short-term, we don't necessarily need to lay them off. We can literally, take them off the schedule. So if it ends up long-term, then we have to get back into, specific numbers. So that's where we're at now. We just want to eliminate a lot of the overtime. As far as the time it takes to train a correctional officer, in-house it's about 6 weeks, where, first of all, they get adjusted to the building, they get adjusted to dealing with inmates and detainees, and then they are required within 6 months of employment to go to 5 weeks of basic correctional officer training in Springfield.
So you can send them a few at a time?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Anything I missed?
That's pretty much.
Downtown jail.
Oh, downtown, are they?
No, we are housing them. They are required to be housed together. So unlike the marshals, we cannot mix them with our local inmates and our marshals. They have to be housed together, so we are housing them out of the new facility.
Mrs. Evans?
Thank you. Do you have bilingual people that are able, if you don't already have somebody, I'm guessing you would have to have someone on hand that can communicate as needed.
Right now, we have, I believe, 6 bilingual correctional officers and 1 bilingual deputy. So yes, we do, to answer your question. Unfortunately, they're not all going to be Spanish. However, ICE does have some technology that allows the use of the telephone depending on what type of language that they're speaking, because it's not always Spanish speaking. Sometimes it can be any number of things.
Mr. McConnell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sheriff, is this going to affect the citizens outside as far as keeping your deputies in the facility versus having them on the road? Is that going to affect any of our situations outside of the building?
Obviously, to a point, hopefully short term.
Because we're going to hire
Yeah,
people.
once we get the people in.
Thank you.
Sorry. Mr. Payton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Sheriff, the question that I have, you say you have 75 inmates at this time.
Detainees.
Detainees. If they decide to increase it, what capacity could you go up to?
I told him on the phone last Wednesday night that we could take up to 200.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Stauffenberg?
Thank you, Chairman. Mike, how long are these 75 here for? any guarantee of?
There is no guarantee. I mentioned we don't know if it's short-term or long-term, and that's why I referenced the other counties that are housing these detainees. They are full right now. So, and they are continually gathering these detainees in and transporting them up to the Gary Airport. Obviously, we're working on some other things from an airport standpoint too, since we're adjacent to ours. I mean, there's a lot of things in the works right now, and a lot of this is preliminary. But I did want to just update the board that, you know, some of the things that we've talked about are starting to happen, and we have no control over the timing of it. Like I said, I was in Orlando, Florida when I got the call from Director Wong, so.
Thank you.
And I battled through Hurricane Matthew.
If there's no other questions, thank you, Sheriff. You've given the Finance Committee some information to digest, so thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Next.